Most of us were given a cookie-cutter template for how to live, love, and succeed. Go to school, find the one, get married, build that dream home that everyone expects.
But what if you've outgrown it? What if you're ready to live, to love, to think a little bit differently, even if it makes you the odd one out?
We're deviants, two people questioning the systems, the stories, and the identities that shape us. From politics to pleasure, culture to connection, this is where taboo meets truth.
And if you've ever felt like the black sheep, the cycle breaker, or just someone who doesn't quite fit that cookie cutter mold, you're welcome here.
And today, we are talking about one of those taboos that still makes people blush.
Because most of us were taught growing up that real love means finding that one person that's going to meet your every emotional, sexual, and spiritual need. But what if love could take different forms, or many forms, and still be ethical, secure, and really deeply connected? I'm Nyla, coach, a writer, and a recovering good girl. I help people rewrite the rules of love and intimacy so that they can build relationships that actually fit who they are.
And I'm Cole, your favorite curious cultural commentator, maybe a recovering bad boy. Debatable.
Recovering? I'm not sure.
Hey!
We're two deviants who love a deep chat, and we love to explore what happens when you start questioning the rules that we've all been fed by society. And today we're diving into something that always raises eyebrows: ethical non-monogamy.
Or as we like to call it, being an ethical slut.
Exactly. Ethical Slut was a famous book from the 90s, for those of you who might be familiar with it, by Dossie and Hardy, and it's a reclaiming of that word, slut.
I've been trying to reclaim it for decades. I think that book, The Ethical Slut, became a bit of a Bible for people exploring what we're going to call ENM, ethical non-monogamy. I feel like that term, ethical non-monogamy, has been catching on in some places, maybe where you are in the UK and around London. Most people know what it is, but in other places, it still sounds like a foreign language. I'm down in Australia, and I still have to keep explaining to people what it means when I throw that acronym around. Do you agree with that? It's sort of catching on here and there, but it hasn't really become part of the global parlance yet.
Yeah, I think it's definitely starting to become more and more mainstream, or people are beginning to become more familiar with the terms. But I'd definitely say that it's not well understood. People don't really know what it means to be an ethical slut. And maybe there's an assumption that it's just all about sex and not about the freedom or the kind of the honesty and the authentic relating that comes with it. So I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, I think even in the most progressive, cool circles, people still sort of talk about it in hushed tones. There's still a lot of shame around it, lots of judgment. So the goal in this conversation is to sort of demystify the term, talk about what it is, what it isn't, apply some emotional literacy to it also.
Yeah, let's see if we can do both.
This episode is not a pitch for why you should be an ethical slut. But what we're hoping to do is look at how people who practice healthy and ethical non-monogamy, look at how they think about things like connection, intimacy, love, pleasure, boundaries, because the way that ENM people approach those, I think, is really insightful for any of us, regardless of what shape we want our love life to take. And I think there's a lot to learn from people who have managed to pull off this pretty tricky thing, but also pretty fulfilling thing if you manage to do it right.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, we've both questioned whether monogamy is the best fit for us, or if we've just accepted it because it's, you know, the default model for love. The two of us have come from very different places to kind of explore that. So I think this is going to make for an interesting discussion. Exactly.
You and I have both thought, is monogamy the right fit for us, or is it just what we've been told to do? So maybe we should start our discussion right there. Why do we treat monogamy as the default? Let's get right to the root of it and just question that first assumption.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good starting point, because I don't even know if monogamy is something that comes quite naturally to our species. I think it's quite a recent phenomenon, and it's connected to marriage, property, religion, capitalism, some ways of kind of ordering humans into kind of neat pockets of two rather than romance.
Yeah, right. Society trying to make some order out of chaos that is the human sex drive.
Right.
And I'm sure we could have a whole episode on, the roots of marriage and what it's meant over the ages. I was trying to do a little research, and we all talk about how marriage was originally just a sort of economic, political union of families. And it wasn't really until like 200 years ago, maybe in the Age of Enlightenment, where the ideas of personal liberty or personal fulfillment or choice started to come into it. And then in just the last 100 years, where we started being told, mostly by capitalism, that a nuclear family is the path to happiness. If you think about the 1950s model, that's where this idea of like happiness happens inside your nuclear family and your white picket fence.
Right.
But then this idea that marriage is about finding the one, like your true love, finding that one person you're meant to be with, that's only been around since like the 70s and 80s. And I start to wonder if really the way we talk about marriage now, about marrying your true love and finding the one, if we've just sort of retconned this very antiquated institution that was never meant to be about emotional fulfillment or personal liberty, and we're just trying to fit a square peg in a round hole now. So I think there's dozens of reasons to really question why we're assuming this is supposed to be the only way.
Yeah, and it feels like it's been around much longer than, just the last 50 years or so. I mean, the 70s was also the kind of the free love movement. In many ways, it was maybe
true,
full of liberation and the space where people could really truly express themselves. And then it seems like we've put ourselves in a box again and decorated the box in so many ways and made it feel like this is the only way to feel fulfilled in a loving way in your life,
Yeah, the hippies really seemed onto something with the whole free love movement. I guess we're going to be talking about where that movement has come since then.
Yeah. So when did you first realize the find the one story didn't really fit you?
Let's see. I guess that happened to me on two levels. There are two sort of instances that I think of with that question. First of all, just realizing that I was queer, because let's be honest, the institution of marriage, it was never a natural place to be gay. And also, look, I realized I was gay. Yes, I did not choose to be gay. I know it's really trendy these days, but I can't take credit for it. Realized I was gay. That's really one of the ultimate ways to be a deviant, right? Is to be queer in this world. And I certainly support the marriage equality movement, and I'm happy for my gay friends that have gotten married. But when I realized I was gay, I also just realized that these institutions didn't want a gay person. I mean, it's like trying to get into a club that doesn't want you anyways. And so I think just already being deviant in that way, I started to question why I should continue to follow any of the other scripts if they weren't designed for me anyways. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it feels like it's like quite a fundamental wiping clean of the slate, and maybe making your own rules from there on. I'm imagining it was quite destabilizing at first because you look around you and everybody else is kind of following a different set of rules and you're trying to recreate your own.
It's a perfect way of putting it. But yeah, it wasn't too fun as a 17, 18-year-old trying to come to terms with these things. But it was really liberating. And I guess I'm grateful to be forced to question all the scripts from a young age. So in that respect, I am grateful for it. But then I think the second time where I started to really think about E&M as an alternative was, I guess, when I sort of stumbled into it on accident. When I was dating around, I was looking for the one, and I started dating two people around the same time, and I developed connections with each of them, and I really developed romantic connection with each of them, and the rules of monogamy say it's not supposed to work like that. But I started to think, I guess I need to make some choice here. But it felt like it felt like an unnatural choice for me, because each of those relationships were giving me something completely different. The side of me that felt connected, the energy that I was getting and the energy I was giving each connection was different. I was trying to think of how to describe it to people, and I settled on it's almost like trying to choose between wine and coffee. Like
right,
both great things, but different energies, time and place.
Totally.
And so for me, it felt unnatural to see these in competition with each other. And we talked in the Friends episode about you're allowed to sort of be polyamorous with friendships. But when it comes to sexual connections that even have a romantic element, we're told that there can only be one. And it felt unnatural to me. And then I learned from there that there's a whole vocabulary around this in the ethical non-monogamy space. That's a long answer to your question.
Yeah, but I love it because I think really what you're touching on is like how multifaceted we are as humans, right? Like we interact with people on different wavelengths and different levels, and we connect deeply in different ways with different people, just the way we do with our friends groups. That's why it's possible and almost desirable to have, diverse set of friends where you can geek out on Star Wars with one set. You can kind of talk about personal growth with others. You can go and dance to your best tunes with the others, and you can kind of sit at home and sip coffee with some others as well.
To anyone listening who might mistake me for a Star Wars fan, I'm actually a Star Trek fan. I will geek out with you about Star Trek. It's a common mistake, Nyla. It's a common mistake.
Well, there you go. See, that's how ignorant I am about Star Wars and Star Trek, because for me they're interchangeable, but clearly they're two different things.
And isn't it beautiful, everyone? I can be friends with Nyla, and she doesn't have to be a Star Trek fan because I've got Star Trek friends, and that's fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, how about you? Yeah. I mean, was there a moment when you started questioning this monogamy default?
Yeah, I mean, I bought the fairy tale. Totally. Hook, line, and sinker. I was like, all right, there is the one. I met the one. We got married. It was all beautiful, I think where I really had a big moment of questioning was probably similar to other people who kind of I've since talked to, is like when my relationship broke down. And some time after that, when I really started to gather myself again, I started to ask myself the question about what kind of intimacy I wanted to invite into my life and on what terms, because I've realized through having been married that for me, marriage feels like quite an outdated institution. And I know it really works for some people and it can be a really beautiful thing. But personally, with my own set of values and with the kind of life I lead, I feel like it's not something that necessarily feels that important to me anymore. And I reflected on how I kind of just coasted into these things because in many ways I was, probably looking to feel some validation and feel like I was on the right track and that kind of things were going well in my life. And this was the next thing you're supposed to do. And so I did it. And, in hindsight, I wish I had asked more questions at that time in my life. But in many ways, it's, the silver lining is always the opportunity to be able to reflect and learn from the things that you go through. And so for me, it's been an opportunity to really question what does kinship look like for me? What does companionship look like for me? What does intimacy look and feel like? And I think I'm at the stage of my life where I don't see myself living with a partner ever again. I mean, never say never, of course, but I don't expect to find intimacy in a marriage dynamic anymore. And so I found myself thinking, well, where, what do I do? Like either you're kind of casual dating, which feels a bit icky, it's like for me that almost lacks depth. It's just driven by a very physical need and it feels a bit meaningless. And then on the other hand, you've got this kind of institution of marriage or this kind of very structured way of being with the one. And it just really made me question, like, surely there's got to be other ways out there where you can have deep and meaningful relationships where you can also experience intimacy together. And I think where I landed was this thought around friendship, which is why I'm so glad that we did the friendship episode first, because I realized that so many of my needs were met in community with people who I consider my platonic soulmates, so I feel deeply loved and seen by these people, so much so that they meet that need that I was originally expecting my one true love partner to meet for me. And it made me realize that when I am seeking a partner, if I'm dating, I'm now expecting different things from them, than I was previously, say just 10 years earlier. And so my whole viewpoint on how I meet my own needs has shifted, and my understanding of like what I want in relationship with somebody else has also changed. So I still love romance. I still love feeling like I'm with somebody. I still love dating. I think there's lots of beautiful things about being in a relationship. I just don't think the structure of it has to be limited to either you're casual dating or you're in one kind of long-term relationship that's kind of headed towards marriage.
Yeah, so you're not ready to reject romance. You're still interested in intimacy, but you're realizing that you don't have to expect all this from one person. I was also thinking, I was really glad we started with friendship, because we took a little air out of the idea of a soulmate, and we said, actually, you can find soulmates all around you. It doesn't need to be like this big, true one and only, because we're putting so much pressure on this phantom concept. And so what happens when you do tell romance to sort of cool its jets, take a little pressure off, and just get from it what you need, right? I think that's sort of what we're talking about.
Maybe one other thing I'd add to this is that a huge part of my own journey of moving from, that very fairy tale, find the one story to where I am now is also realizing that I put a lot of my own needs and my own self-worth and, my self-image was really influenced quite significantly by who I was with and whether I was married or not, and whether I was kind of meeting that like outwardly successful image. And I think the shift to choosing to live more authentically and just choosing to live in authentic expression, whether that's ugly, whether that doesn't meet somebody else's expectation, that was actually quite a freeing way to say, I actually don't care what anybody else thinks about who I'm dating or not dating, or, whether this is too soon or not, or whether I should be now remarrying or not, whatever. Like, I kind of let go of a lot of those beliefs that maybe were guiding me to think that, well, I need a man because that will make me feel more stable, or that will make me feel like there's two of us to, solve the world's problems. I'm a capable person who's able to handle, what life throws at me. And I don't need that, but I kind of told myself that I was almost weaker without having my other half completely,
Oof,
So
that's a wild term, isn't it?
I mean, we kind of are fed it through our lives in ways that feels like it's just, not a big deal, but it's chipping away somewhere inside at that self-esteem. And I think my transition to E&M has definitely coincided with kind of a stronger self-esteem emerging as well.
Amazing. Yeah, I mean, marriage is the ultimate status symbol for one thing. We think we're supposed to be, but then we get that in our heads too, that we're succeeding or failing at life based on whether there's someone next to us. And I don't think it's a coincidence that marriage is a sign of success, and being a slut, a term we're working on reclaiming this discussion, is supposed to be a sign of shame. Oh, you're clearly a lowlife if you have multiple partners. So, okay, if
I don't
we
think
agree,
we feel ashamed.
I mean,
slutty and proud, let's just say.
But it's been a journey for me. I can't lie about that. So all right, let's rewind the tape a little bit. If we agree monogamy is not the only model, what are we talking about when we say ethical non-monogamy? What does that actually look like? There's maybe a lot of people listening who still want to figure out just what the heck we're talking about when we throw this big term around.
Yeah, good question. And I most people will think of non-monogamy as cheating, right? But at its in its simplest form, ethical non-monogamy is about having multiple romantic or sexual relationships with honesty, consent, and care. And of course, the ethical part is hugely important here.
Emphasis on the ethical. I think that, sure, E&M is a relatively new concept, but non-monogamy is pretty old, everyone. It's as old as the institution of marriage, but it's called cheating. But when we talk about ethical non-monogamy, we're talking about honesty and consent and care of everyone involved.
Exactly. Yeah, and there's a whole spectrum, right? It's everything from monogamish, where you're mostly together, but maybe sometimes you're opening up to something, then open relationships, polyamory, relationship anarchy. There's a whole spectrum of how people practice what fits under the umbrella of non-monogamy.
Could you define relationship anarchy again? We might have discussed it last episode.
Yeah, it's this idea that there are no predefined hierarchies for how relationships should be treated. No one relationship is better than the other, but each individual relationship is prioritized based on its individual depth and needs. So just
Okay.
because you're my romantic partner, I don't necessarily prioritize you, above my friend, or just because you're my brother, I don't necessarily prioritize you, above my child. I don't know. It's this idea of like taking away all the labels and saying the importance of that relationship is really truly defined by the depth of it.
Yep. Yeah, I love it.
It's kind of wild.
I mean, it sounds chaotic, but I like to think of it as empowering.
I find it inspiring. I find it hard because I think we're so wired to think about relationships in certain ways, right? Familial relationships. I still find myself, even as somebody that's actively trying to decenter romance in my life, I still find myself getting carried away with the energy of meeting a new partner and wanting to spend all my time with them, and then wanting to cancel plans or move things around with other people. And I'm like, no, I shouldn't do this. This is not aligned with my values. So it's a bit of a journey, to like shake some of these things off that we've been conditioned into for so long.
Well, and E&M it's not easy. We're probably going to get into that too, but it can take so many different shapes. You just listed a few, and even those things you listed can take all different kinds of forms. Polyamory, it might take the form of a throuple. That's a relatively new term. Or you might have a girlfriend over here and a boyfriend over here. Or you might have like monogamish. You might have a primary life partner, but then both you and your spouse, every Wednesday night, you go out to spend the evening with your secondary lover, right? I guess rather than getting into all the bits and pieces and all the different options, it's maybe useful to say that you can think of E&M less as a specific lifestyle and more of a mindset. Is that fair?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's both like an inner and outer orientation around this, right? So the inner orientation is about, how does this align with my values? How does this help me think differently about love and romance, and have, a more abundant mindset around how I can love my partner at home and still have enough love to give somebody else. Love is not a scarce thing. Time is scarce, of course, and how we spend our quality time is scarce. We all need to do our laundry, after all. But, I think the idea of love being an abundant source is something that we see in our friendships. Again, we have lots of friends, and we don't think, when we meet a new friend, we don't think, oh, well, I don't know if I'll have time for my other friend now if I make this friend. Yep. Or will I be cheating on my other friend by making
I'm cheating on my friend. Right. Right. And we don't say, sorry, I've already got like 2 best friends. I'm out of friend love for a third. Right. That term, love scarcity versus love abundance. The first time I heard that, it just unlocked something for me, because of course love isn't a scarce resource. In fact, I like to think that the more we practice love, the more we're creating it. I mean, it's a duplicative resource that just keeps on. It's the gift that keeps on giving. And so stop thinking of it like we only have so much love to give.
Exactly.
That's what really helped me. Yeah. That's what clicked for me when I figured out why people are approaching romance like this.
Yeah. Yeah. Ruby Rare, in her book, The Non-Monogamy Playbook, calls it elastic love. This idea that love stretches when it's met with communication and capacity. It doesn't snap, And another book I'd recommend is Polysecure by Jessica Fern, where she actually talks about how the idea of building a secure attachment with yourself is much more important than the kind of outer orientation, right? So that gets me onto the second part of the question around, is it a mindset? Well, it is a mindset, but also, how do you live that mindset? The outer structure is what most people see. Am I in an open relationship? Am I single but dating many people? Am I polyamorous, where I have multiple emotional and sexual relationships? Is it only about sexual freedom and having more sexually liberated experiences, which, is still very shameful in our societies? Like, if you want to have more sex than the sex with the partner that you're with, that's really considered, it's a very negative thing. Like, what's wrong with you? Why are you not satisfied with...
Sex addict? You just can't get enough?
What's wrong with you? Pleasure and sexual liberation. These are very normal human experiences, and we've made them culturally bad because it's part of that bigger playbook of religion and patriarchy and, cultural conditioning of how we control people into how we want them to live. But if you think about the concept of E&M, it's really about radical honesty and communication and building relationships that feel respectful, whether they are short term and more about experiencing pleasure together, or whether they have depth and meaning, and those relationships will likely have different expectations. You probably won't be living with all of them. You won't be, having the amount of emotional intensity with all of them.
It's allowing for all those same shades and gradients and nuances that we have in our friend circles. We've got acquaintances, we've got besties, we've got people we catch up for lunch once a month. I mean, it's actually really easy once you break away from this monogamy thing. Yeah. It's easy to breathe that same sort of nuance into your sex and your love life.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because the first time people hear about it, they're like, well, how does that work? I'm struggling with one partner. How do you have so many, And I think it's this misconception that having multiple partners means giving that much emotional intensity to every single one of them.
That's it.
Yeah. So for me, I find it much easier to think about it as a mindset when I think about how abundantly I love my friends and how I can have lots of different kinds of friends, how each of my friends brings out a different version of me. You have your Star Trek friends, and then you have your non-Star Trek friends, and same with me.
Also, my really glamorous, sexy friends who are going out on the town with me, for example, Nyla.
Exactly. I'll be in that category. So for me, I find it quite freeing to think about it from at a values level. I really value people who are really intentional about the kind of people they curate in their life and the kind of life that they live, and they have passions and interests, and they want to leave a mark on the world. And so ultimately what I'm saying is I enjoy meeting people who could be my friends, and what better than starting to explore whether there could be intimacy with those same people. It doesn't mean that it's always there, but it means that there's a possibility of something beautiful emerging together.
So you're saying some friends watch Star Trek together, some friends have sex together?
Yeah, I think that's great.
I love it.
What's not to like,
I mean, yeah, I love that. Tell me a little bit more. Do you remember when you first heard about E&M and how you first started to get into it? What did your beginning to explore E&M look like?
Yeah, I think I heard about it on a podcast. I first started hearing about people's sexual liberation because I think I'd gotten to a point in my own growth as a person where I realized that I'd done so much therapy and coaching and other things in my life, and I had worked on everything but my own sexuality. And, there's cultural lenses around why I had, not touched that area. And I just come out of long-term relationship, and I was feeling pretty low about myself, and I needed to just kind of start building my self-esteem back. And so I was starting to think about ways I could be in community with others as I was learning these things, because I was feeling a bit lonely. And in that curiosity, I came across a bit more of an understanding about the sex positive lifestyle. So this idea that sex isn't a terrible thing and it's okay to desire it, which is a bit of a stretch from the South Asian cultural mindset that you get fed your whole life, where, it's shameful as a woman to have sexual desires. You are supposed to be there to, service your husband or whatever they call it. But yeah, I know it sounds like a car garage or something, but anyways, I'm a mechanic. But I think I finally felt seen when I listened to one of these podcasts. It was a podcast called Brown Girls Do It Too. It's actually a famous podcast in the UK, and it's perfect because it talked about South Asian culture, the taboos around sex and intimacy and all of these things. And the two hosts, Poppy and Rubina, it's an award-winning podcast, and I love it. And for me, it just triggered some thinking about, what have I internalized about my inner eros and my sexual self and myself as a being that can experience pleasure? And that kind of kick-started a whole new line of curiosity for me. And you know me, so I get a bit obsessed about a topic and then I need to know everything about it. So I read lots of books about it. I have lots of book recommendations, which we'll put in the notes. Everything from The Ethical Sluts, the Non-Monogamy Playbook, Polysecure, Come As You Are, The Body Keeps a Score. So much helpful stuff in all of these books and just helping me understand like where I was at and how to work with that conditioning, especially because when I looked out into the world and what was happening with the sex positive lifestyle in places like London and around the world, it's a little bit intimidating, you know, to go from where I was to, oof. I'm like, whoa.
Well, it's a big gear shift.
Yeah, it's a total U-turn. And there's so much glamour, you know, and there are beautiful curated experiences that you can be a part of. And I really felt this urge to want to explore all of that because I had, like many people after they come out of divorces, I had a year of yes, you know, like let's say yes to all the things we say no to. Let's rediscover ourselves and let's like break free of the cage we've been living in. And that was one of my yes moments. I was like, you know what? I want to go and see what all this is about. And I want to explore what it means to feel good in these spaces. And it was a bit of a journey. So it's kind of where it started.
I mean, you are and will always be an inspiration to go from traditional Muslim marriage to attending eyes wide shut parties.
I do like to dive in at the deep end.
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna have to talk about those more in other episodes because, of course, I mean, yeah, you've approached E&M from in the really structured way. I mean, there's these very intentional ethical non-monogamy parties that sound fascinating, whereas I just do it like I'm just like the cheap free tickets E&M on my own terms.
Yeah, I would say they're two separate things. I love that you just
went.
Yeah, they're two separate things. So there's the kind of the one thing is being sexually liberated and exploring yourself and your preferences and like overcoming the shame and the purity culture and, you know, all of this social conditioning that a lot of cisgender women grow up with in our societies, whether you're South Asian or not. You know, lots of people grow up in very Catholic or very Christian environments as well, have very similar experiences to the ones I had. So you have to kind of reframe in your mind what it means to feel like a sexual being, you know, and to embrace that and to be okay with it and not feel guilt or feel bad. And there was this one thing that I really struggled with for a long time where my mind was like, yeah, I totally get this. It's rational. It makes sense. And I'm totally ready for this. And my body just my body was shut down. It was not able to like catch up to what my head was thinking about all of this like cognitive dissonance. And so as frustrating as it was, I had to like really slow down and understand like my somatic experience in my body and try and work through what it means to create safety for myself around these things that my brain has been wired to believe have been unsafe for me. So behind the scenes, there's been a lot of like personal growth, even though it sounds all glamorous and sex party and whatever, you know,
sure.
But a lot of it is about getting to a place where you feel safe and secure in your own being and self. And then understanding, you know, what the outward version of that looks like. And I think E&M came to me as a concept during this time, but I wasn't really sure that it was something for me at all. I was shocked when I heard about it. I was like, how does that work exactly? Like, when I feel jealous, and will I be able to, you know, feel fulfilled in something like this? Will I feel kind of safe and loved and cared for in a relationship where somebody is kind of splitting their time between me and someone else? So I had all of those first thoughts that are very natural to have.
Totally, yes. A lot of people ask these questions. They're very sensible questions.
Yeah, and they're all data. They're all triggers and information about the things about the needs that you have, that you need met, right? So the way that I think about it now is that if love is an abundant source, really what I'm asking for in a relationship is for my partner and I to both understand what helps to both feel secure. If we can both help each other feel secure, then him having another partner or me having another partner doesn't, you know, it doesn't change that.
It doesn't change what the two of you have together, right? It doesn't have to affect.
Yeah, it doesn't get diluted by somebody,
Yeah,
by other
you're
relationships.
Right. They're not in competition with one another.
So what I've learned about E&M for me is that when those feelings of jealousy or insecurities come up, it's something to really tune into, because it helps me to understand that there are some needs I have to help me feel more secure. And if we could help each other feel more secure in relationship together, that is the abundance of love in practice. It's about helping each other feel safe and secure. And then other relationships outside of ours don't dilute what we have together.
So when you first started exploring E&M, you had all these very natural questions about jealousy, practicality, time management that a lot of other people have when they start hearing about this. It can sound a bit daunting. And we talk about E&M like a mindset. But when we're all entrenched in this monogamy mindset, and when everything you're describing sounds like a big flex, but since then, you've gone on to found Unbound Relating, where you actually coach people through this transition from monogamy to non-monogamy and evolving into this mindset that we've been talking about. So what does that look like in practice? What do you find most people need help with to start thinking in these new ways?
Yeah, it's, it's really like an emotional gym membership. Like it's like a total workout. But I often say...
It's a whole new set of emotions that you have to start training, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
They're muscles to build, right? So we all have this muscle memory, and just like working out in the gym, like if you don't flex those muscles and you don't, practice over time, you don't build it.
Okay, you got to train your slut muscles.
You got it. Okay. I call it the inner emotional toolkit that we need to build. And I focus on self-trust as the kind of foundation of that, because from my own experience, I found that when I trusted myself and my own instincts better, it helped me to access freedom in a way that felt safe, right? So I'll tell you what I mean by that.
Yeah, please.
I think there are three kind of pillars of intimacy that connect us to self-trust, particularly in the context of rewriting the rules of love and intimacy for ourselves, right? The first one is pace. And pace is about listening to your body's rhythm and not rushing to match someone else's. And that's so common in these spaces. I noticed when newbies kind of arrive in the whole kind of ethical non-monogamy world, and myself included, and everyone else is like around you and they're all cool with everything and you want to be cool with it and just kind of go along with the crowd. But you've got to slow down and go at the pace of your nervous system. And in my experience, I found that my body would just shut down and just not respond to what was going on around me when I was just going way too fast, because I was putting myself...
Because you were moving from 0 to 100 with the journey you had been on, and it makes sense that it was just feeling a little overwhelming. Like you dove into the deep end, right? Right.
And I think my confusion at the time was, is this fight or flight for my nervous system? Or is this just the discomfort of being in a growth space? In something new, and therefore it's unfamiliar. So if I look across the E&M space and I talk to people and ask them, what's one thing you would tell your younger self as you entered the ethical non-monogamy world? They probably all would say, go slower.
Yeah. Makes sense.
The second pillar is power. And this is about standing in your power, owning your truth. It's not power over, it's power within. And what I mean by that is about being able to know what your boundaries are and being able to speak your needs without apology, without guilt, without worrying that you're asking for too much, or you're going to come across as not cool, or they might not respond well to it. So many of us have those moments where we just feel awkward and we people please in the moment. And we're just like, oh, wish this wasn't happening, but it's just such an awkward situation. I'm going to go along with it. But actually, if we had a form of words and we had some more clarity about what our needs are, we'd be able to kind of speak from a much more grounded place, and we wouldn't worry necessarily. Even if our voice was shaking, we wouldn't worry about whether that was too much to ask. And that's where a lot of people's predominant work is like, how do we get to know ourselves with enough clarity so that when we're relating to another, we can say what we need without feeling we need to shrink ourselves.
I was guessing that when people work with you, they might struggle with this one a little bit more than pace, because, I mean, maybe women in particular have been told their whole life that it's not really about their needs or their truth.
Mm.
You're not an auto mechanic anymore, right? You're allowed to pursue your own desires, right?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, without generalizing, there are a couple of major patterns that emerged, especially with women. This idea of like doing most of the emotional labor in your relationship or overgiving in your relationship to the point where you're kind of abandoning your own needs and people pleasing to keep the peace, avoiding conflict. Yeah. I remember saying that to myself after my relationship broke down, like, I will never again hold my tongue to keep the peace. Never doing that. It just never ends well. You're just sacrificing yourself, and the world does not need any more self-sacrificial women, for goodness sake, right? So this is a big one, and this is where there's a lot of work. And, people talk about self-awareness all the time, and I think there's different degrees of it, right? I think when you go much deeper and you go beyond the surface and you look at what's at the emotional root of the patterns that you show up in relationships with, it can be a really powerful way of understanding, how am I trying to meet my needs in a relationship with another? And what could I do for myself that means I don't need somebody else to meet that for me? So I really believe this is a huge part of it.
Yeah, not easy, but I guess what this is all about, right? Okay, so that's... Mm-hmm. We've got pace, we've got power. What's the third pillar?
Yeah, the third pillar is pleasure. And here we're not just talking about sexual pleasure. We're talking about the ability to surrender and not be in control. Feeling safe enough to just let go, to enjoy all the small things in life, to reconnect with your sense of vitality and aliveness, which also includes your eros, right? Includes your sexuality. It's about finding ways that you can create a container of pleasure for yourself that has the safety, both the emotional and the physical safety, but also allows you to feel held in a way that puts down the armor and allows you to just be your most childlike version of yourself and reconnect to that beautiful, inner vitality.
How do you help people manage to find their power and surrender to pleasure at the same time? Because to a layperson like me, that almost sounds like two different energies you're putting out into the universe, right? Like standing your ground and speaking up for yourself, but also just like letting the universe find you. How do you balance that?
I think that's a really good question, because I think when you say stand in your power, it sounds like a really assertive, almost defensive posture, right? But it doesn't have to be. Boundaries can be gateways to intimacy. Right? It can be about like creating the conditions for a more pleasurable environment, rather than saying, well, this is a hard no and this is a hard stop only. You can talk about boundaries in much more nuanced ways that help you understand what versions of something create the emotional safety for you to have deeper connections. And I think there can be some misconceptions around our boundaries. I often found for myself that sometimes I needed to go a little bit past a boundary, still in a safe way, but I needed to kind of somewhat cross a boundary in order to know where the edge of it was. And I sometimes found
Test
that
a
difficult concept to be with, because, well, a limit's a limit for a reason, right? But I think if you can find safe containers or safe ways to try and explore a boundary with somebody without crossing it too far, and having some safety in knowing when you can pull back, there is still pleasure to be had within that. And then, the whole spectrum of pleasure in itself can also include things where there's a pain pleasure threshold for people that can be explored. Those two things can work together in our brains as well. So it's really fascinating how arousal and ease and pleasure and that whole letting go works in our nervous system, and how that helps us to just access a different kind of state. It's supposed to be fun. Like, the whole point of it is that we want to access pleasure and joy and fun and vitality. So I would hope that the combination of these three things helps us to access a space that feels not only empowering, but also really inspiring and fun and exciting.
Yeah, I suppose, I guess the first place I went is, it should be fun, but there's no denying that E&M can be really tricky also. And maybe we'll discuss how to navigate the complexities of that also in other episodes. But I like what you're saying, is that the first step for you and for a lot of people to really start playing in the space is to have a conversation with themselves about what they're open to, what they want to get out of this, and what they're looking for, right? Because that's, I think that you talked about the inner and the outer components of ENM, and it makes sense to start with the inner and think about all these really personal things. Is there this pace, power, and pleasure? Should a person sort of start looking at one before another, or do you build all three of them up at the same time when you start playing in the ENM sandpit?
I think they are for people in any kind of relationship, whether it's non-monogamous or monogamous. I think this framework, I use it with my clients in my one-to-one coaching experiences, and I think it's just so powerful to build kind of deep intimacy and understanding of yourself. And so I would say, I think they work together in tandem because they feed into each other as well. What I think is important, though, is that whilst it sounds fairly straightforward and simple, it is harder in practice to do this work on your own. So try and find somebody you can work with. I'm trying to build a community of people who are doing this kind of work so that you can have others that you can kind of co-regulate with around this. But it's body-based work. It's not intellectual. So a lot of the people that are in my community or that come to me are often the folks who have a sense of what their boundaries are. You know, they've read the books, they've got the understanding intellectually of these things, but they're not quite embodying it yet. So they still end up overriding themselves in relationships sometimes, or they let their kind of fears drive them a little bit in kind of anxious or avoidant attachment loops. And our culture still rewards self-abandonment disguised as strength, particularly for women, right? Oh, she did it against the odds. Or, you know, successful people are often praised for pushing through and not pausing to check in with themselves to see if this is aligned with their values or what they even want, right? So just because you know about something, it's not the same as allowing yourself to have it and to embody it. And so a lot of people can still carry like the residue, guilt and shame or fear that comes with like trying to shed some of those old beliefs and step into these new beliefs. You know, it's like knowing you want to quit smoking and then just saying, well, yeah, I know the facts about why I should quit, and so therefore tomorrow I will quit. It doesn't quite work like that, right? There are belief systems that you're changing. You're rewiring your relationship templates in your brain. You're rewiring those neurons, and that takes some time. It takes some sitting with discomfort. It takes some trying new things. It takes some encouragement, right? So I always say we are not supposed to be doing this work alone. It's the whole reason I set this thing up in the first place, because it's the support I wish I had when I was entering these spaces. It's lonely. It's tough.
I'm obviously coming at this as a gay man, and I have a lot of emotion seeing straight people having all these conversations, or straight people beginning to have all these conversations, because, you know, gay men are historically very good at being sluts. But I think that's probably very much due to the fact that we've been shut out of the monogamy script. I mean, we weren't allowed to get married, and so we weren't allowed to love. And so gay sexuality just became limited to this sort of these transactional hookups and completely non-intimate encounters, you know, just people using each other's bodies in this transactional way. You know, there's cruising in parks for hundreds of years, and now there's Grindr.
I mean, this is fascinating, right? Because you're almost coming at it from a completely different, almost opposite approach.
Yeah, I mean, like gay men are told, oh, well, you're not going to get married, so you may as well be a slut. I mean, the script, we're talking about script, is for gay men to be sluts, but to do it without any sort of connection or intimacy, to really use each other, which I'll be honest with you, can feel very lonely. And so hearing you talk about exploring this together, and I mean, also just when you have a connection with someone and you're exploring what it's like to be intimate together, sounds pretty radical, even to a very accomplished slut. But what I think is exciting, what I'm enjoying seeing happen in the conversation around ENM, and I think queer people are also very much leading the discussion here, but it's showing that just because you're promiscuous doesn't mean that those encounters can't be intimate also. Doesn't mean you can't pursue real emotional connection through multiple partners. Because I think for too long, those have been seen as mutually exclusive. You can find intimacy through marriage, or you can go be a slut and have transactional sex.
Yeah.
But I think this underlying ethos of E&M that you're describing challenges that and says, no, there's beauty to be found when two people find pleasure in each other and connect with each other. And I think that's what excites me about this whole conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's fascinating to hear it from that perspective also, because you've been shut out of the scripts around one true love. So the things that many women that I work with try to tap into is like a deeper connection to their desire without feeling any shame or guilt about it, is a thing that comes so much more naturally to people in the gay community. And
I mean, Lord knows, Lord knows queer people have their own share of shame and guilt when it comes to desire. But
sure.
In some respects, you're right. We are able to celebrate desire, but I think we still, even in our minds, aren't giving it the value that I think we should. I think we're still treating it as like this itch we have to scratch rather than something beautiful to explore, and I think there's actually a pretty important distinction there, that thinking about power and pleasure can help you connect to. Whether or not you've been a slut for decades or you're still thinking monogamy is the way for you.
So what I see is that emotional growth is really just the universal need across all of these spaces, right? We
Absolutely
all can benefit from it. And I think, emotional maturity is the new sexy. Someone who can communicate a boundary, be vulnerable, and stay present.
Now that's hot. Yes. So you're saying that this emotional maturity, this self-awareness and being in touch with one's emotions is the ultimate sexy for you. Do you reckon that if everyone who might be listening to this does that, they're going to all turn into E&M sluts? Is that what happens when you have emotional maturity? Is that what you're saying, Nyla?
No. I think what's been great for me is to know that there's just more than one model, right? There's monogamous models, there's non-monogamous models. What seems really important at the root of all of this is intention and the choice around how you build the structure for the relationship that's right for you. It doesn't have to be you coasting into the template that society around you at large will accept, but it's about choosing what feels the best fit for the life you lead and the way you want to love.
Yeah, I think that's it. It's not about one of these many, many models we've talked about in this episode is better than another, polyamory being better or worse than monogamy. But it's always going to be so much better when you've had that conversation with yourself and you've really checked in with yourself about the pace you want to move at, what your desires are, if you're making yourself available to pleasure, and then you'll figure out what you actually want, right? I think there's the liberation that can happen into any one of these options for you.
Yeah, totally. And I think a lot of it comes from just deeply knowing yourself better in these spaces as well. So what do you think we can learn from ethical sluts, Cole?
There's something about there's something in this sort of toolkit you've described that's the key to unlocking certain serendipity to life, leaving yourself open to possibilities. And I think one of my learnings, at least personally, is that love might not have a permanence. You might find a life partner where you grow and nurture that love for the rest of your life. Or in tandem, you might also spend an evening with someone with a one-night stand, but the two of you are open to an honest, truthful connection with each other that can be pretty beautiful for one night. And I think there's just something about life is impermanent. Love can be impermanent too. And, call me a hippie, but chasing sex shouldn't be abandoning intimacy, but actually, I think, going towards it. I think maybe that's what I've learned about the E&M mindset.
I love that. Yeah, and I really love this this idea of impermanence, actually, because I think it's one of the scripts I've shared from that whole monogamous mindset was this idea that there is one person you're going to be with, and that's going to be kind of a permanent life that you build together. And I really now have started to embrace this idea of, we meet people through different seasons in our life. And we walk a part of our path with them through that season. And I don't actually think any relationship I'm going to have with somebody else is going to be a permanent one. The one that's going to be for a lifetime is my relationship with myself. And actually, I was joking on my Instagram this week that I learned about what an isosceles triangle is at school, but I didn't learn about how to build healthy relationships. And God, would that not have been more helpful?
Yeah, if they hadn't wasted time on isosceles triangles and talked about love triangles instead, am I right?
You're right. Yeah, but I think that the other thing I would say about what we can learn from ethical sluts is that there is something about abundant love that allows me to be a much more expansive version of myself that has been such an empowering and exciting part of exploring this world, in the sense that I feel like I'm meeting new parts of myself that I haven't met before, that haven't had the chance to express themselves before. And I can do that in a way where I feel met. I can feel kind of emotional intimacy, intellectual intimacy with somebody. And I also don't have to shrink myself or merge my life or think about all these other, details about how this is going to work. And so it feels like I get to forge my own path. I get to write my own rules for intimacy, and I get to really center liberation and autonomy, and still do that in a way where I can have romance and love and all of these beautiful things. It doesn't have to be clinical or transactional or casual. It's deep and meaningful.
Yeah, casual sex is such a dirty word, but that's just because we're not giving it the respect that it could have, right, if we gave it that. The comparison to friendships is so informative, I think, because we have these different friends that unleash different parts of our personalities, tap into different parts of our soul. And if you just got one partner, who knows what other parts of yourself aren't even getting any air to breathe, or you might never discover. Even sexually, frankly. I mean, we keep talking about personality, but like different partners can unlock different sexual parts of you, different sexual experiences that maybe you don't mesh with just one partner, right?
Totally.
You can have all sorts of different roles and dynamics and kinks and quirks. Just live a little,
Yeah, and, exactly.
Respect
YOLO.
yourself and respect your body. YOLO.
Yeah, and I think as we kind of start to wrap up, I'm also thinking it's good to have humility and give ourselves grace as we walk this path, because I feel like we're constantly reframing our kind of monogamous conditioning, and it takes time and it's constant learning, and sometimes it's 2 steps forward and 1 step back, and it's about pausing and really listening to your body and not judging yourself for not being better at this.
Okay, so I guess we can think of this as a bit of a crash course in what it means to be an ethical slut. And maybe if you still don't feel like sluttiness is right for you, at least how to be a more conscious lover. That's really what this has been about, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not about collecting partners. It's more about collecting honesty, courage, connection, so you can be really free in love and you can express yourself authentically in whatever way or shape or form that takes for you.
Yeah, I do really want to get into later discussions with you how honesty comes into play with things like ENM, how communication works, how we deal with things like jealousy, because that's what you're really collecting, is these skill sets to deal with some stickier things as you're also experiencing more connection. Mm-hmm. So I hope you're willing to dive into some of those trickier things with me in future discussions.
Yeah, let's do
it. But for the time being, okay, I want to go back to the framework you presented: pace, power, pleasure. Just as maybe a starter kit for anyone listening, how could we check in with ourselves for where we're at with each of those things?
Yeah, so this isn't about labels or lifestyles. It's about relating to yourself, okay? So the first thing I would say in terms of pace is just notice where in your life you might be rushing something, where if you had the chance, your body might just want to slow down, right? Where do you feel the pressure of rushing something? Just tune into your nervous system's pace. In terms of power, I would ask you to consider, where are the moments where you don't say what you're actually thinking? You kind of give away your power instead of speaking your honest truth. Like if your bestie was in the room and you just kind of say it how it is, or your mom or your sister or whatever, where's that voice? In what circumstances are you just kind of going along with it to be polite.
Mm.
And from a pleasure perspective, where are you holding back? In sex, in joy, in connection, in being fully alive? Like if you had a magic wand and you could change the way things were in one or more of your relationships, what would you change?
Yeah, easy enough. So maybe instead of going to a Eyes Wide Shut sex party this weekend, someone can start with those basic questions.
Start there.
Baby steps.
Yeah, and I'm still working on some of these basics. These are important for us to kind of keep a consistent practice around. I have a little note next to my kettle in the kitchen that says, my experience is unique and I can slow down. My experience is unique and I can slow down.
Well, on next episode of Deviants, Nyla and Cole consider if we're turning into hippies. Because it kind of sounds like you and I are all about the free love. Discuss. No, we will be back with another discussion. I think the next one coming up is pretty juicy.
Oof,
we're going to look at the collision of shame scripts and fear and where that leaves our desire and ability to pursue our desires. Oof.
Oof, I love it.
So something light.
Just easy topics, keeping it easy.
Just like me. Hey.
On that
This has been your ethical slut, Cole.
This has been Nyla and Cole. Until the next time, stay curious, stay kind, and just a little bit more deviant.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Till next time.